All right, Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have another epic one. We have Steve Wynn of the Dream Syndicate. Steve Wynn is a singer-songwriter and guitarist. Along with the Dream Syndicate, you might know him from his solo work, from his work with Steve Wynn in the Miracle 3, as well as Danny and Dusty, Gutterball, Smack Dab, and the Baseball Project. Steve's got a lot going on. The Dream Syndicate is touring Europe right now. If you go to stevewynn.net, you can get all the up-to-date dates for Steve with the Dream Syndicate and the plethora of other projects. The Dream Syndicate has a new re-release of Medicine Show. It's available now on all the streaming platforms as well as off the website. This new re-release is an incredible dive into the Dream Syndicate during that crucial time from the first record to the second record. This re-release is a deluxe edition with 4 discs, most of which have unreleased live concert cuts. So you get to hear the band evolve in real time. One of my favorite cuts from it is from the Agora Coffee Break concert series here in Cleveland, Ohio. They have the whole, not the whole concert, but they have a bunch of cuts from it on this deluxe edition. And I hope one day they put all of it out. Steve and I talk about that during our conversation. He shared some Cleveland stories about it. I really enjoyed this conversation with Steve. I left very inspired. And we dive into the songwriting process and just like different ways to think of it. And there's a moment where we dive into a songwriting exercise, and I find myself using that exercise a lot now. A little house cleanup before we get to this conversation. I play in a band called C Level, letter C dash Level. We are a funk punk reggae rock group based out of Cleveland, Ohio. Here we take 12-string acoustic guitars and run them through Marshall amplifiers. We have a new song out with HR of Bad Brains called What's Left. It's available on all the streaming platforms. We also have a show coming up with Marbin and Logan B and the Dirty Leaf here at Negative Space in Cleveland, and that's April 24th. If you go to c-level44.com, you can check that out. Anywho, there's this other part of this conversation I find myself thinking about a lot, and it's about when Steve went to meet Alex Chilton. And now Steve's got a memoir out called I Wouldn't Say If It Wasn't True, where he really expands upon this whole experience. But he goes and meets Alex, and Alex is kind of bumming and not really excited about what he did, and just kind of in a down place in life. And he kind of shares this story about how he took that experience and no matter what, didn't want to be kind of down like that. And I'll let Steve tell it more during our conversation because he does a way better job at it. But I've really been thinking about that a lot. Anywho, before we get to this conversation, if you hear anything you like, if you can rate, review, subscribe to the podcast on any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to amazing guests like Steve and sharing their insights with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Steve Wynn. To jump into it, I wanted to ask about a couple of your first few bands. Can you tell me about The Purple Passion and Sudden Death Overtime?
As much as there is to tell about those two things, for sure. They are my first 2 bands. Purple Passion. They're to be totally truly archivist about the whole thing. They're the same band. We did change our name. It wasn't my first band. I was in bands before when I was 9 called Don't Dig This. The Light Bulbs was one of them. I was playing in bands from a very early age because I started playing guitar and writing songs at 9, and would find anybody around who even had any kind of pretensions of or delusions of being a musician and get together with them and play music. But at 13, I actually did find some friends who could play, who actually could put chords together and knew how to play Neil Young solos or whatever. And the 4 of us got together, 5 of us actually. It was a singer, 2 guitar, bass, and drum band, and we called ourselves Purple Passion, which was named for a soft drink at the time. I don't know if it's the West Coast thing. We were based in LA, but Purple Passion had this really great radio jingle. I can even sing it now. I was saying, "Purple Passion is good to drink," and I just love that. So we called ourselves Purple Passion, but I don't know, all of a sudden, changed our name to Sudden Death Overtime for this band that basically just played in a living room, would play Who and Rolling Stones covers, but through whatever connections or whoever's ambition or motivation, we ended up getting a couple gigs at our junior high school in West LA. We played a full concert on the school field one day, and we also played to 400 kids in the school auditorium one day. So kind of funny. That was my first little taste of being in a band and learning for a show. That was a real eye opener.
There's something like I think so. Well, one at that point where you're trying to figure out who you are and what you are, right? Like, what am I gonna do? And like, so every early band goes through those like name changes and total ideal shifts, until they
Sure.
figure out
Oh
what
yeah.
they want to do. And but also like I think there's such an important like impact from like those like high school and middle school talent shows because like that's for me that was where I had my first few gigs and you're like I
Oh,
finally have some type of identity, you know?
it's a big deal, right? And especially when you're able to do that and play for your friends and your peers and kind of show off the thing you can do. And it gives, like you say, it's your identity. And some people are the jock or the math the math nerd or just a good looking guy or this or that or everybody's got some kind of thing they are. And if you can find which I did as a shy kid, kind of a loner that I was back then. It's like, well, I can play music and I can be that guy who can write a song. And that was big, meant a lot to me. It was kind of the way I could connect to people at that age.
You mentioned you're writing songs at 9. Was that Sing My Blues?
It was, it was indeed. Yeah. That's the first song I wrote. Yeah. And it kind of a complex little song for a first song. Actually, it had bar chords, like go figure. And, probably more chords and more going on than a lot of songs I write today. But yeah, that's the first song, and I wrote. And between the age of 9 and 13, I wrote a lot of songs. I can remember some of them pretty well. I was like a lot of kids of that age would at that time would go to summer camp. The parents, especially yeah, in those days, and my parents would send me off for a month to summer camp, and I like a lot of kids getting to that age. I kind of liked the idea of the allure of girls and flirting with girls, but I was very again kind of shy. So I would my way of I don't know getting noticed was to say, look at this song I wrote, and I'd write songs, and people would be kind of floored by it. It was almost like I'd pulled out a magic trick of some sort, like that, because nobody was doing that sort of thing. And so that was kind of my way into to be cool and to be noticed. It's like writing songs. So I cranked them out for a while. 9 to 13, I probably wrote, I'd say about 20 or 30 songs. Not enough for a Broadway show maybe, but enough to kind of have a catalog of songs.
And just even to like have like a discipline at that young an age to be like I'm going to write something and then have it to be to use for the show, or just like it's so hard for like anyone, a younger person to kind of develop a habit, and stick to it. Like unless an adult's kind of like navigating it from afar. Um, so when you were writing, like, I mean, and that clearly stuck with you because writing became like what you wanted to do moving on, right? With sports writing.
Yes, it did. And I will say it's about the writing thing. I mean, I was a lot. The fact I was a very, very big music fan from the age of say 6 years old. Just for whatever reason, that just hit me, and I, had that um, that a lot of music fans like you and like a lot of people we know, not just music as a casual background or your favorite bands that make you happy, but I wanted to know everything. I was an omnivore for just whatever I could find on the radio and in record stores and in whatever magazines existed at the time, and any way I could find out, I wanted to know about it. And so, as a music fan at that young age, for some reason, and this still holds true today, if I heard something I liked, my reaction wouldn't be just like, oh, I want to put it on and dance around, or I want to put it on and, you know, you know, lose myself in the mood of the song, which I would be true as well. But it's like, I want to write a song that makes me feel the same way, or that sounds like what I'm into right now, because somehow, I don't know. I don't even know the motivation. Why do we write songs? I don't know. But that was my response to being inspired and motivated by something. So that's what kind of was why, and it still is. If I hear a song, if I hear like right now, I'm into Ryan Davis and Roadhouse band. There are some couple great records that that band has made, and I hear while I'm walking around thinking, oh, I want to go home and write a song like that, and I don't know, I'm not sure what that comes from, but that I've always had that. So that was the writing thing. But like you say, moving on to what you asked about the sports writing, yeah, around 13, around the time that Sudden Death Overtime broke up, I was for about 4 years. I don't know, fell out of the idea of being a musician. I still loved music. I still was buying records. I still was very excited about bands, but it was a weird time. I turned 13 in 1973. Between 73 and 77, um, 50 years ago right now, it was, I'm not saying there weren't any good records, there were plenty, but it was kind of a doldrum era for music where the, I don't know, the great pop writing of the 60s and the novelty of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and new sounds every week, and the 70s being kind of free form and exciting, had somehow fallen into this sort of no man's land of, bad prog and bloated ideas and just this stuff that, there's a reason that punk rock happened. And when that period came along, I didn't have the desire to write songs or play in bands anymore. I was happy to listen to music. And it took punk rock to pull me out of, that era of, like, well, I'll be a sports writer, which I was a pretty sports writer, by the way.
I've also read you've mentioned Steve Murray as far as sports writing goes as an influence. How did
Jim Murray.
Jim Murray? Okay, Jim Murray. How did Jim influence you as a sports writer, and have you found any like crossover from those lessons of sports writing into songwriting?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I got into, and I wasn't a sports fan as a kid. I say kid, I mean preteen. But somehow at age 12 or 13, I got into sports and baseball in particular. I don't know. I don't even know to this day why. It wasn't there before. I did, and I started writing about sports. And I guess because I was pretty good at it and excited, had that same sort of, obsessive love at that time for sports and stats and history of sports that I did about music. I guess said to you that I wrote songs because I wanted to connect with something I was so enthusiastic about. Same happened with sports. Like, well, I'm not happy enough just to watch a game on TV. I want to write about it and interview people who are doing it and think about it, and use whatever talents I have as a writer to approach that. So I would, I was into it and pretty, like I say, I was, won awards, and I'm sure I was on the fast track to that being a career for sure. There was no doubt about it. And I did it, but I think that I learned a lot from journalism, being a journalist, in that the way to tell a story. And I think that does come into my songwriting now and in the years since, where I look at a song and say, well, what is the angle? What is the story? What am I, not necessarily who, what, when, where, why, because my songs aren't always entirely, descriptive of a narrative, but what is the point here? What's going, why is this going to be in the morning edition of the paper? And I think that plays into songwriting. Now, ironically, I've ended up being in a band called The Baseball Project, which for 17 years now has done nothing but write songs and play songs about baseball. And there I really did very literally bring in what I learned as a sports writer to what I'm doing on stage and in the studio.
That's beautiful. I think, like, to go back to, like, I do understand that, like, that itch of something. You're like, I want to know how this works. I want to kind of put this in my arsenal of being able to express myself. And, like, because when I hear a group like a band or a writer or anything like that, that I kind of go down a spiral of just listening to that artist and trying to incorporate little bits into, like, a thing, not to be that person, but just to be able to, like, speak in that dialect, And like, there's something that's so, like, to me, it gets to be like, if I listen to something that is scratching that itch at the time, I can't, like, it doesn't calm me down or zone me out, tunnels me in to trying to figure out how to write like this person, or what, and like, or how, what I mean? Like, and it's such an interesting thing. And like, it really does kind of like shift that, like, use of music for me. So when I was reading and getting ready to chat with you and heard that you were into sports writing, I was kind of diving down the rabbit hole of just even what the process of that is. And just, what I mean? Because, like, I've read some sports, like, yeah, I'm not the hugest sports fan, but I've read some articles and kind of got the layout of it. And like, it is really interesting, kind of just like the six-word story and how that kind of falls into like songwriting, and how that itself can be the whole narrative. And you don't necessarily have to build the traditional like song type of narrative if you have like a phrase or something that really hits that home. In like a recent Dream Syndicate song, like Miles to Go, is what kind of sticks out to me as something like that.
Put Some Miles On. You mean that one?
Yes. Shit.
That's all right. That's right. And it's on my mind because I was just working on it this morning because we're adding it to our set for the coming tours. So I've been kind of like revisiting that one. Like, oh yeah, it's like good. So yeah, you hit the one that's actually on my mind today.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Why is that coming into the arsenal now? What's bringing it? Are you guys just changing it up because you got a lot of dates coming up?
Yeah, we do. We're playing a 4-week tour of Europe, and we'll have a nice catalog with the Dream Syndicate. So I should try to change it around, pull different things in, and that was just a song that was in the set, kind of every show for a few years. I took it out, but now I'm kind of missing it. It's something we do particularly well. It's that kind of thing. I think they call it motoric. The kind of krautrock, hypnotic, repetitive type of driving down the road kind of song. Just I like playing that one. But what were you asking? Why'd you bring that in the first place?
To the idea of saying of a 6-word story in that sense, and I think
6-word story.
Yeah, like with when it comes to journalism or when it comes to like I feel like diving through your arsenal of music, there's a lot of like just one line that kind of hits the whole song on the head type of deal. So sure. I guess and that, that's my perspective of it. But like when you're writing and you're coming up with titles and you're going through your whole process, do you typically think in kind of like short kind of like bursts like that and then expand upon it? Or what's that look like for you?
Well, they come from different ways, but that song in particular, for example, is one of the ones that happens. Well, my kind of the best way for me when it happens, where it starts with the title, where you get a really good title that you like, and then you think, well, okay, I got that. Now what do I do with that? I mean, I remember coming home from my job at the record store one day in 1981 or 82, and just writing on a piece of paper "The Days of Wine and Roses," and of course, I knew that was already a song and already a movie, but something about that I went, I like that. Why am I thinking about that right now? And at that point, I knew I wanted to write a song, my song called "The Days of Wine and Roses," and it just came. Why was that stick in my head? But that led me to to the song and the album title and everything. But the title "Put Some Miles On." I just thought about that line, like what that meant, and then I had fun with it because in the song, it's kind of a little a silly pun where one verse is about putting literal miles on, which is what we do on tour. Another is like putting miles on, like just getting older and showing the wear and tear you've gained over the years. And the third verse is actually literally about putting on a Miles Davis record. So it's just kind of but the title gave me the idea of where to go. It's almost like you say the 6-word story, and it's also like, like journalism, but also like a detective forensic work where you say, okay, I've got this clue. Now, what does this all mean? And that's kind of a fun way of songwriting. If people talk about this all the time, but if I look across the room right now, and I see I've got a, 12-string Stratocaster right in front of me on the wall. It's like, well, maybe I write a song called 12-string. Well, what would a song called 12 strings say? Well, it might talk about, the connection to the birds, or it just might be about, why do we need twice as many strings? Is twice as many of everything a good thing? And who knows? I'm vamping right now, but you take a small little clue and try to follow that. And that's why actually co-writing is nice, or any kind of collaboration like you might do on a screenplay or anything, where you have somebody to bounce off who throws you the clues. But if you do work by yourself, you got to make the clues on your own.
I think that's really insightful. Because even just like something as simple as like a 12-string guitar, you can think of like, well, there's always 2 strings attached. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole like that's cool. I really, because
6 pairs of 2. What does that mean? Right, exactly.
Yeah. There's always something else strung along with what you got to do. I like this, Steve. Let's write something.
Here we go. We're off and running.
But yeah, no, that's because like I don't know. I find myself working on songs a lot by myself. But do you tend to? I mean, you're writing a lot. You like going through your career, getting ready to chat with you. I'm like, there's a constant source of output. So, do you find yourself doing more collaborations now, or? Yes, for sure. I mean, there was a period, when the Dream Syndicate started, the first 10 years we were together, or the 80s, those years we were together.
I wrote a fair amount, but I always wished I would have written more. But I was kind of paralyzed a lot of at the time, often because I don't know. Maybe I thought too much about what it all meant, and maybe the fact that we'd had some success made me constantly question. Well, what do I do now? What am I supposed to do now? And that's not a good place to be as a writer. In the '90s and in the decade that followed, the aughts, those decades, I wrote so much. I think I just felt the freedom at those years. I knew I was good enough to do what I was doing. I also knew that my job wasn't going to go anywhere, which was a nice feeling.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
well, I've done this enough where I can keep doing it. So all of that gave me the freedom to just I'm just going to write a bunch of songs, just write them all the time, and that was a great period for me. I look back nostalgically on those maybe 15 years where I just was writing so much. To be honest, I don't write as much these days as I did in the past, and it makes me sad sometimes. But I tend to now write when I need to write something, when it's like, oh, time to do an album. I'm going to make an album with this group of people. Let me come up with a quick little, something that, not quick, but something that kind of will give us something to work on. We've got to play something, so I may as well write it. And so I write to assignment now, but that's going back to your question. It's why I like collaboration, because if you say, well, so and so and I are getting together next Saturday to write a song, then you got to do it.
Right.
And then you're also going to get inspired by the person you're working with. So if I'm working with somebody who has ideas that I might not, and I'm in a room with him or her, it might be, oh, like you're saying earlier about the new chord or whatever, they might throw an augmented ninth at me that I hadn't played in that position before, and I'll think, oh, I like that. Well, let's go. Then so collaboration is a good little motivator these days that sometimes I need, and maybe people do in general.
Oh, I think so. I definitely agree with that. Like, it's bouncing ideas is a lot easier when you're not just caught up in your own head and they like fade or the water spills or the cat not, you know what I mean? Like something distracts you from it, you know what I mean? Because you have a direct thing to readdress the person you're there with. And like, I think it's little tricks like that really keep us focused. But like, I find that interesting. So once there was like no pressure of like what would work, and no pressure to it sounds like no pressure to keep up with who you're working with other than yourself. It made this release of just being able to write anything. And like, I guess like, was there a point in which you knew that for yourself, that I am good enough to do this? And like, cause I definitely understand the job not going away is something as every musician fears, because every gig is temporary. And like, but I guess for you, when did you know that I'm good at this and this job's not going away? Like, was there a specific moment where you kind of realized success, like to me, Steve?
Yes. Yes. And then I'll tell you what a real turning point was. Around the, because after the Dream Syndicate broke up, I went and started a solo career that did pretty well. I sometimes get surprised when I was just actually revisiting something last night, for example. My wife Linda and I, we watched the movie Nouvelle Vague, the new Linklater movie about the making of Breathless. And when it's a great movie, by the way, and we finished watching it, I said, my video for my first single when I went solo for the song Carolyn used a lot of the elements from Breathless, which it did. The director used a lot of footage. I'm not sure if he had the rights to it, but from Breathless. Anyway, I'm spinning around here. What I'm trying to say is, I've forgotten how much my solo career at that point, it did really well. I was kind of a regular on MTV, and it was kind of a hit, that song, and it was exciting, but also kept me a little bit frozen and like, oh my God, I'm on the verge of breaking through. What do I do now? And that was not good. But a couple of years later, I actually decided to push that all aside, manage myself, because I just wasn't, I don't know. I felt the better things were going in my life, the more pressure to keep it going. That kind of brush with success was paralyzing in a way, because I once again had that thing like, oh my God, this is exciting and I want more. Not good, but that happens to a lot of people. And shortly after that, I just said, you know what? I just want to be out there working. I just want to be out there making records and playing shows. I don't care if I'm successful as long as I can keep doing this. It was just kind of an epiphany I had. And at that point, I started managing myself, which I've done now for 30 years. And that was the greatest thing, because I think I really hit the mindset of, well, the better manager I am, the better it is for Steve, the artist, because then I can work. But the better the artist I am, the easier it's going to be to manage me. And that was a little trick I played on myself that I still do, which kind of just makes me want to write just to make it easier to book shows next year. So weird, but I don't think of it that concrete every morning of day of my life. But it is true. I know, well, if I can write some songs that are good by my standard and connect with people and have that kind of ring of truth and human element that's going to reach, well, myself and my fellow musicians and then the people who like my music, then odds are I can go out there and play 100 shows next year. They're going to go really well. So let's get to it. Let's see. And it becomes less of an abstract thing, less of like, I want to hit record. Well, you can't make that happen. I want to be, on the cover of Rolling Stone, or I want to be get a 10 in Pitchfork. You can't make that happen. But you can try to do something that you visualize would be the best version of yourself. And I sound like a new age guy here, but it's really true. For example, when I was starting out the Dream Syndicate in the very earliest days where I was making records, the trick I would play for myself was I would imagine, and this really worked, because I was such a music fan, I would imagine putting a needle on a record, dropping the needle down on vinyl, and what the sound would be I'd most want to hear when that needle went down. I would visualize the sound of the record I wanted to hear. And it worked for a long time. Days of Wine and Roses was that record. And, now it's not so much that, and that's more a matter of, well, what would be the visualization of the music I'd want to be taking on the road and getting, out of a van into a club every night and playing. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's very concrete. What's the best, what's the best way for me to be me year round on stages and on planes and in vans? And it's weird to say that, but so that makes songwriting and performing and making records just all part of a process to, live the best life I can.
Yeah, but no, that makes so much sense, and it's a very clear direction of where to take the, because I feel like sometimes like when you create something, you're kind of in the as a creator, you're in the emotional and kind of creative state of what this thing is you made, and like the kind of expectation of where that goes besides what it's trying to convey is not as direct, right? And like, so to be able to visualize it on a grander plane of what you're trying to reach with, like, okay, here's this song I wrote, here's how it's going to play into the show, here's the type of show I'm going to try to pitch to the venue, and here's how I can perform it, so it makes sense all along the way of how you can do that. And like, that's like, I guess to kind of dive more into that process, I guess, with like, so for myself, the creative aspect of it makes sense to me. The idea of putting together the show makes sense to me. And where I start to lose some of the skill set, right, and is the managerial approach to things. So like, I guess my question would be for you to kind of code switch to the kind of manager state. What are some like skill sets or like tricks of the trade that you found for yourself that work to help you be like, okay, I pitched that show, it didn't work, I got no email back on the booker or whatever. How to, what I mean? Like stuff like, I guess, skills in that to kind of keep that managerial practice as tight as your creative practice.
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate that I have enough of a history and enough fans around the world that it always kind of works. So that's great. Like, if I was just starting out and you asked me the same question, say, God beats me, I don't know, get a song on Bandcamp and hope people like it, or do TikTok videos. I mean, all those things are great. So I kind of am fortunate that I've been doing this for professional, I guess, if you want to get for 40 years now. And there's always something going on somewhere, like, oh geez, they don't seem to want me in Sweden this year. I don't know why, but boy, they're happy to have me over in Denmark. I'll go there. There's always something going on, which is nice. And there's always somebody proposing something. So that's very fortunate. I'm not dealing from zero. I'm not dealing from rubbing two sticks together and hoping to make a fire. I'm sort of, it's there.
Yeah.
So it's more a matter. It's more a matter of just if you're talking the managerial thing, it's like trying to figure out which are the things I want to do most and how it's going to work. And I mean, I've quoted this so many times, and I'm for all I know, he didn't really say this, but I believe Richard Thompson said something that my failure is the secret to my success, which I love. And what he's saying, I think, if he said that, and I agree with this, is once you realize that you're not going to be, Michael Jackson or Bob Dylan or whatever, they're not going to be at the top of the game where you're just going to get out there and work. Once you realize that, you find ways to make it work. And I think a lot of people, my peers or people out there doing what I do, you say, well, I want to go out and play these 50 shows. And, I have to find a way. The most mundane thing is like, am I going to travel in a van or a car? Am I going to travel with a 5-piece band or by myself? Am I going to stay out for 6 weeks or 2? Dumb little things like that, but you have to be aware of that. Am I going to, I don't know. I early on with the Dream Syndicate decided I just didn't want to be one of the musicians who goes out and sleeps on random floors every night, which is just not knocking that. I know a lot of people who did that, and that's a great thing when you go into a club and you say, who's got a floor for us to sleep on? Plenty of bands did that. I just said, I don't think I want to do that. And not because I'm a spoiled brat, but because I'm again going back to being shy and being a loner. The idea of being up all night and having to kind of be on throughout the night was something kind of terrified me in a way. So it motivated me to figure out how am I going to find a way to stay in, whether they're the cheapest hotels in the city or whatever, make that work. So I guess I'm spinning around. What I'm trying to say is there's a pragmatism to being a lifelong musician of saying, I want to do this now, figure out a way. And it starts with, fortunately, again, being fortunate enough where I have enough of a, following and fan base where something's going on. I just have to make it put together to make it happen. I hope that it made sense.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Because, even with what you just said, and even I think you said something close along the lines of near in the documentary on the Dream Syndicate with the second record about just kind of wanting to be a road band and have sell this many records, and then the record company wasn't into that. They're like, well, let's, you know what I mean? But even just having that kind of clear direction of this is the thing I want to do. And there's a way to do it, you know what I mean? And that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like there's a lot of or just even the skill set of being able, okay, Denmark doesn't want me, but Sweden, you know what I mean? I can't, maybe I switched up what you said, but just being able to separate yourself enough for, okay, this year there's not enough pull here, so let's move it, just to think of that apart from the, just on that kind of business mindset and not being emotionally what did I do not to win these guys last time? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So being able to switch like that, I think is a key strategy of being able to manage yourself. But going back to right after the Medicine Show, kind of knowing that this is, I think it was the Medicine Show, right after or during the Medicine Show release, knowing that that's kind of the trajectory you wanted to do, and the reason we're chatting here today is you guys have the re-release of the Medicine Show. So
right.
With all the live cuts and can we talk a little bit about I guess the process of with that the new re-release, why all those specific live cuts and the expansion, kind of seeing the band grow during that period?
Either the period leading up to it or after, you mean?
Kind of. Let's start leading up and then work our way to after.
Well, we and this is the box set brings us out really well, is that we made Days of Wine and Roses, and that record really, really caught on. Not on top pop charts, but as far as the kind of people we were and were reaching for people, music fanatics, and record store people hung out in record stores and who read Cream magazine and had college radio shows, that sort of thing. That was our tribe. It just connected immediately and profoundly with that group, and that was exciting. But almost immediately after, our bass player Kendra Smith left the band, and we spent 6 months on the one hand having this great success. It was just dizzying in a way, but at the same time having to reinvent ourselves in front of people. And we went into making our second album, not being the same band we were 6 months before when we made our first album, but not knowing who we were. And it was a very difficult process evolving into the band we would become. And that all went down in the studio. Medicine Show took 5 months to make because I think we were working with a notoriously difficult producer, Sandy Pearlman, but also because we didn't have enough focus on our side to be able to say, this is who we are, so back off, we're going to do this. By the time we came out of that studio and had made that album, we'd made a record we liked quite a bit, and we went on the road and became the band we still are today. The band that went out touring for Medicine Show, at that point, knew who it was very confident, was very, knew we were good, and that was it. It was there from that point on. It was easy just to say, I know how. I don't know a lot of things. I can't always make everything work, but I know how to go onto a stage and play a good show with anybody. And that was kind of the beginning of that period, and that was great. I mean, I've always been all about live music. I just like playing live, and that started with the tour for Medicine Show.
And like you said, that during the whole process of the tour and I think of the recording, you felt like you became this other person. And like, I got to imagine that may have been because of some of the difficulties of the recording session and just the kind of, it sounds like off what you just said, like the transference of like becoming this whole new entity of a band.
Yeah.
So is that like I guess that whole idea of like becoming another, because that record sticks out, and maybe it's because I put a lot of, knowing we're about to talk about it today, I put a lot of focus listening to it. But like during that time, as far as like writing would go, was there like a difference, like a different approach that you took during that for that, because it was like so kind of like hectic? Or is that like kind of what brought out this different personality, or was it just that tectonic plate shift of the Dream Syndicate morphing into what it became now?
Well, I think that for us and for a lot of bands that have success early on, when you write the first album, you're just writing songs you like, for some hope that you can get a gig or anything can happen. And if you have success, your songwriting can often be this combination of either I want more of what I have, I want more that I don't have, or it can even be, now that people are paying attention, I'm going to really blow your mind. And I was kind of the latter. I think I wrote Medicine Show not in terms of I want a hit record or I want the people who love me to love me in the same way some more, but more, I'm going to blow your mind. And I don't think I thought it that concretely or wrote that down on a piece of paper or would say that in public. But I think in the back of my mind, there's a feeling of, I'm a big music fan. I have very strong ideas of records that mean a lot to me. And rather than trying to make, let's say, for lack of a better comparison, Thriller, a record to be a monster hit, or Rubber Soul, a record that was, evolved a band to a new place, but still was very accessible. I wanted to make the weirdest, darkest, most off-putting, challenging record I could. For whatever reason, I felt like, if you think you like what I do, I'm going to really put you to the test. That's where I went. And so I wrote and made a very confrontational record. Again, I just think of things that, that I most recently see or hear, but this movie that was about Godard, about Breathless, about Nouvelle Vague. It's funny because at least the way the movie portrays it, Godard was trying to make a movie that just would be, in a way, hated. They finished. I don't want to spoil the movie for people. Basically, they're not trying to, win over people or cuddle up to people. It's like they're drawing a line in the sand. They're laying down the gauntlet. And I think that's the way I felt with the Dream Syndicate. It's like it wasn't good enough just to be popular or to be loved. or to be cheered on. I wanted just to kind of to challenge my own and other people's way of hearing things. That's what I thought of as great music, and that's that's noble or whatever it might be. It was also foolish because it's a lot to take on for a 23-year-old kid. So it was a challenging time.
Yeah, but well, I mean that's the type of music that, I mean, as a music fan, as anyone who's into any type of art, I guess, or creative outlet, the things that stick out are the artists that challenge the typical approach to everything, you know, in whatever medium it is, film, novel, or music. Like those are the ones that everyone kind of keeps going back to, and they kind of stake, you know, they put a flag in the ground and like make everyone think about, you know, and like, so that makes sense that you would want to like leave that type of mark. And like, I guess it definitely is a noble cause, but like, it definitely like, I think that's what makes this such a good record. Like, definitely, like, I think no matter what the case is, it's always like after time, I think the album or the book or the novel or the film or whatever starts to get the like people have time to think about it and try to figure out, or, you know, try to understand it or realize how impactful this is at the moment, even though it's past the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess during the one song that like, and especially because of this new compilation that has all the like the live cuts of it, John Coltrane's Stereo Blues. Can you tell me a little bit about the writing and creation of that tune?
Well, there's no writing in that. It began as a jam. It began as a 1-chord jam and just evolved from. We started doing it before making our first album, before Days of Wine and Roses, and we just became a point in the set where we would just, you know, take 1 chord and the very simple 5-note riff, melodic guitar line, and just then after that point, anything was free. You could do whatever you wanted to, and we took that into the studio for the second album, for Medicine Show, and just played it, you know, every day and chose the one we liked the most. But it's always been kind of a free form song. It's sort of solidified more over the years. Where now, when we play it live now, there's a lyric, there's a title, there's a certain structure to it, but still a song where we can mess around a little bit, which is nice. And it's kind of the thing that the Dream Syndicate does best. I mean, to this day, if I go to make a new Dream Syndicate album, I'm still, especially now more than based on referring back to what I was talking to a second ago, these days I do actually try to write songs that sometimes I think people will like. You know, I'm not trying to piss off people as much as I thought was a good thing to do when I was younger. But I you know, if I write a 3 or 4 minute pop song that's still very Dream Syndicate sounding, it's always the 10-minute song that people like the most. That's just the kind of band we are.
Yeah.
And God bless it. I mean, that's great that people like that side of us, and we like doing it.
When because when you say that, I think of the record. The Universe Inside, and like those tunes are,
for example,
yes, for those tunes are very long, but that whole record has a completely different like kind of vibe and approach, but it's very much a dreamlike state as when you listen to it. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask about, there's the WMMS live cut from the Gora of John Coltrane Blues and and a few other tunes. Can you tell me about playing, if you have any memories of playing that, because that concert series here in Cleveland is pretty legendary. Can you tell me any memories about that experience?
Oh yeah, boy can I! And I'm glad that version is on there. I mean, WMMS, which of course was one of the premier progressive rock stations in the country, they were the first and really only commercial station to embrace Days of Wine and Roses. God bless them. They you know, we were being played plenty on college radio and stuff like that. But they were playing us. And I remember actually the first time I ever went to Cleveland, first time we played there in early '83, driving into town at 2 a.m. with the radio on and hearing them play our song, playing That's What You Always Say, and segueing it into Mr. Big by Free, which I think was like, boy, that was a life highlight. At that moment, it's like, I can't believe I'm driving into Cleveland, Ohio, and hearing my song segued into Free. Wow, this is something. And it was great. They were behind us. Well, a weird thing happened. They like you said, that legendary series they would do, they asked us to play it. And I remember we played Buffalo the night before and drove after the show and got to Cleveland maybe 5 a.m. and dusted ourselves off and got there and did the show. And we really, unlike a lot of times back then, we would, like I've been talking about in this interview, we would do the opposite of what was expected of us. We would try to be brats. We would try to, challenge. But like I said, we went to that show that day, maybe not trying to suck up, but at least trying to do the best version of who we were. And we did. And we played a show on the air. Well, a couple days later, a week later, whatever it was, they got back to our manager, our label, or somebody and said that we are so offended that they went on the air and they played a show like that. And we got so many negative calls and we will never play this band again. And we were a little bit shocked and a little bit hurt because, believe me, there were times in our history where we did things to earn that kind of a comment. But we thought, God, we thought we were good. All right. And that was that. And then years went by. And I think maybe 10 years later, somebody finally gave me a copy of that show. And I listened to it and went, holy shit, that was great. That was a great show. That was us on a as good a Dream Syndicate show as you're ever going to hear at that time. So it was kind of funny, but I guess they misunderstood who this band was that they'd been supporting. Anyway, I'm glad that tape exists, and I'm glad. I would like to put it out as an entire show someday.
That'd be sweet.
It was great. Yeah, but it's great that it's on the box set in the meantime.
Was it? That's crazy. Like, I mean, I've heard, like, through talking to some other local cats that there's certain things at the station where certain DJs were doing certain things that others weren't aware of. You know what I mean? So, like, I think there's more hip guys.
Oh, that might be. Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I think there was more hip guys into cool shit and they were playing cool shit. And, like, so that may be, and then, like, I don't know. But that, because, like, when I listened through it and then, like, I heard the bit, I'm like, oh man, this is so sick. So did you guys play the Agora that night then too? For the actual concert?
No.
Or no? Okay.
I don't think so. Where do we? God, maybe we. That's good. And I have generally a steel trap memory for the first shows we played. Maybe we did. I remember the Pop Shop was the first time we came through, but I cannot remember where we played that night. Maybe it was the Agora. God.
So
you've quizzed me, and I failed the quiz on that one.
I think you've passed. You got 95 with everything else, man.
Yeah.
Damn, that's so. I guess. Do you have any dates coming through Cleveland soon with the solo project or with the Dream Syndicate? I know a lot of them.
No, and we don't right now, and we're out here. We did about 20 shows in November, December on the East and West Coast, and now we're doing this European tour, and we very much want to do Cleveland and a lot of other places we didn't hit, Chicago and Minneapolis. So we'll probably do some kind of a Midwest, Near East, whatever region, hopefully late in the year, because we've definitely got a lot more places to bring this show. I have been doing Cleveland. It's funny. It was bad because usually I play Cleveland with the Baseball Project, which I didn't last year. And I did do a solo show, but I'm definitely I've been shirking my Cleveland duties, and that's very bad of me. So I will do hopefully this year. Get there a couple times.
Was that a house show? Because I remember you were doing the house.
It
tour.
was.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a nice one too. It was a really good one.
Nice. I have a friend who works at 91.1, and they did an interview with you, I think, for that show, and they were telling me about it. I'm like, no way.
Yeah. It was actually really. I really enjoyed doing the house concerts. I've been doing a lot more of those, and they're really fun. I have had some really enjoyable. I remember playing the Beachland Ballroom just 2 years ago with the Baseball Project, a really wonderful show, and maybe. I think one of my favorite shows ever is we did with the Baseball Project. We played 3 consecutive days at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We were the house band at the Hall of Fame when the baseball All-Star game was there in 19, and that was wild. That was great.
That's so sick.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, this is our gig. This is our deal. Show up, and my backstage is the archival room at the Hall of Fame, and drink my coffee, and here we go. It was great. Loved it.
Very cool. So one thing I know my bass player would be so mad at me for not asking you about would be, you went to high school with Darby Crash. Like,
yes,
can you
I did.
tell me a little bit about, I don't know if you knew him too well or just from afar. Can you tell me about going to high school with Darby Crash?
Well, yeah, for your bass player and for my guitarist Jason Victor being a big fan of the Germs and as well as I am. Um, in my high school, it's called University High School in Los Angeles, and it was just a regular public high school. It wasn't a special, private school. But if you go on, Wikipedia and look up University High School alumni Los Angeles, which is you'll see so many musical and movie and TV stars went there for whatever reason. A lot of the members of the Doors and Sonic Youth and just I can't even begin to list all of them. But at that time, at that period of time in the 70s when I was there, they had a special little section of the school called IPS, Independent Project Studies. I forgot what it's called. Basically for the really smart weirdos who just kind of didn't fit into school but had potential. And Darby was part of that. So I wasn't there. And strange enough, Pat Smear was as well. I forgot each of them real, and they were both students in that section. And they were the weirdos who did their thing, and I don't know what happened there. But I remember that I had a class, a Spanish class, where every day in the class, Darby, who was not, we didn't know what a Darby was, but this crazy looking guy who looked like kind of looked like Ziggy Stardust wannabe, would walk in the class with his boombox playing Suffragette City and write, Bowie is God on the blackboard and walk out. It was kind of a running gag. And he would do this. And one day, this guy who was our, if it was a sitcom, he'd be the recurring character that everyone laughs at. One day he walked in with no boombox and he wrote Bowie is dead. And that's the last time we saw him. And so that was my first encounter with Darby. But then my high school girlfriend, a girl named Michelle Bear, we went out for a year. She ended up being Darby's best friend. If you look at Decline of the Western Civilization, she's the woman or girl at the time hanging out with Darby. She's kind of a major figure in that movie. We went out for a year, and I remember coming back from college. I left Los Angeles to go to school in Northern California, came back during a break, and got together with Michelle to go see a movie. We went to go see Heaven Can Wait, the Warren Beatty movie. And she said, oh, I want to bring my friend. I think he was Darby by that point. And so me and Michelle and Darby went to see Heaven Can Wait. I think they were both on either Ludes or some type of downers of some sort. And they were just throwing candy and crap at the screen. And we all got thrown out halfway through. Heaven Can Wait. I was kind of not too happy about that, but that's my Darby story.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, man, I really appreciate your time. I have one more question for you, and I'll let you go. And it's to kind of go back into some writing. You traveled all the way to meet Alex Chilton, not knowing 100% where he was, just going off the back of a record. And then you developed a little bit of maybe more of a little bit, but a relationship with him. Can you tell me some like songwriting lessons, or just music writing lessons, or lessons from your time with Alex Chilton?
Wow, that'd be a lot. I would, for any of your listeners, I would recommend humbly getting my book that I wrote that came out last year. I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. My memoir of all this, because the Alex story is a big centerpiece of the book. So I couldn't do it quick justice. But yeah, I did go out there, and it's hard to say what lessons, because that trip and that encounter I had with Alex, where I spent a week with him, wasn't really about comparing songwriting notes or talking about process. It was more about just spending a week with a hero. But I think that the biggest takeaway I could say is that in that time that I was with Alex, he was very bitter about or dismissive. Bitter, maybe that's too strong. Dismissive of what he had done with Big Star. Fair enough, it's his prerogative, but it broke my heart and just made me think, no matter what happens, no matter what success or lack of success you have, one, the focus should be on the work. Did you do good work or not do good work? And two, it should be, don't be bitter about it. You're lucky you can even do this. So I'd say the biggest takeaway I'd say is, as I think Gene Hackman says in Unforgiven, I think as Clint Eastwood says to Gene Hackman, deserves got nothing to do with it. And it's true. It's like, just write the songs, play the music, and if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I will say to this day, I really don't get despondent about record sales, show attendance, reviews. I get despondent if I write a song that wasn't as good as it could have been, or played a show that wasn't as good as it could have been. Just do good work and be happy about that.
I think that's incredibly wise words. Steve, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time in this insightful conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. My favorite subject matter. So I knew from the start you're gonna hit me where I like it.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.